I had the advantage of coming from a family of teachers and doctors. Some were small businessmen. And because I didn't need to make money or get famous, I would sing for schools and get just enough money to live. And Toshi was the great heroine because she was able to somehow feed the family on the small amount of money that I could bring in.
Mm-hmm.
We were counting pennies, but she agreed with me not to try and make money. So I just made enough barely to live. Then the unexpected happened when I joined with 3 others called the Weavers. And totally unexpected, we suddenly had a hit record. Everybody in America was listening to our record of Irene, good night, Irene, good night. An old love song, a waltz. Good night, Irene, good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams. It was the biggest selling record since World War II. The blacklisters said, how did we let these people slip through our fingers? They were as surprised as we were. But they started chopping us down. We were offered a big contract for a television program, and we signed the contract, but then came an attack, and the company did not sign it. So they started chopping us down. It took them 2 years. But every month it became a little more difficult to get a job. And finally, after 2 years, we decided to, I don't know if you know the term a sabbatical.
Yes.
Lee Hayes, you said, we took a sabbatical and it turned into a Mondacle and a Tuesdacle. Lee Hayes, like Woody Guthrie, was a genius, a country genius. Came from Arkansas, way out west and south. And then a man who had helped us get started said, I think you should have a reunion. And he went to Town Hall in New York, seating 1,000 people, but they turned him down. No, we can't rent to the Weavers. People would call us communists. He went to Carnegie Hall, which had almost 3,000 seats, and they said, if you have the money, we'll rent to you. And to everybody's surprise, it was sold out. And people came to get tickets and found there was no more seats, and they were so happy for us. They said, oh, isn't that wonderful? They didn't get seats, but they were glad that for us that it sold out. So we started in singing again, but I did not like to sing for commercial things. I wanted to sing for for schools and colleges. So I resigned from the weavers in 1957. I got a good friend of mine to take up my place. But I stuck to singing in schools and colleges instead of trying to sing in nightclubs or big theaters, big places.
And there was a time when the trade unions got under the pressure not to take you.
Well, the union movement in America was never united. Some of the trade unions were very rich and conservative. Some of them were poor. I knew a man named Harry Bridges who led the longshoremen, the men who work unloading the ships. And he knew how to compromise. When container ships were invented, he said to the ship owners, "We know that containers are coming in, and all we want to have is good pensions for the men who will be thrown out of work, because now they don't need so many longshoremen. Instead of picking up bananas bunch by bunch, they have a whole container of bananas, and they just lift up the whole container, lift it up and put it on a truck." So Toshi's brother was a member of the Longshoremen's Union, Harry, and he got a good pension and retired. Yes, I think one of the most important things in this world is to learn how to take the right kind of a compromise. The world is full of compromising.
Yes.
I have a song about Dr. Martin Luther King, you know.
I know.
Until recently, it was my best song, I think, showing how he managed not to try to take on the important things first. You know, when you face an opponent over a broad front, you don't take on your opponent's strong point. You take off something on the side.
The weak point.
A weak
yes.
point.
Yes.
And that's what riding on the front seat of a bus was. People said, why didn't he take on jobs or schools or voting? Riding in the front seat of the bus can come later. But no, this is what the first fight he took on was, riding on the front seat of the bus. But he wins it. He won it. And then he went on to other things. A brilliant man. And he knew they would assassinate him sooner or later.
And it happened?
J. Edgar Hoover thought that King was the most dangerous man in America. And yet, he was not allowed to assassinate him until King spoke out against Vietnam. In 1967, he was in New York, said, I have to face the fact that my country is the greatest purveyor of violence. in the world. We must get out of Vietnam. I'm sure that President Lyndon Johnson just got furious. He said, after all I did for that
him.
man,
Yeah.
he does this to me. And he probably called up J. Edgar Hoover and
Yeah.
said, do what you want. Slam.
Yeah.
And Hoover set out to see that he was assassinated.
Do you think that the same thing happened to JFK?
There's a book out you should know about. It's called JFK and the Unthinkable. And it tells how the plot was argued. He said, we know that if Kennedy gets re-elected, he will get out of Vietnam.
Yes.
We must stop him now.
And he didn't make the aggression to Cuba complete. He only made a short, small thing.
Yeah.
It's more a symbol what he did in the pig speech. So Pete, there were other colleagues. There were sacrifices of the McCarthy era of these people. Wasn't it a cut into the democratic history of the US, which is also feelable today in the Tea Party or in the right wing, that they destroyed so many artists and intellectuals from a humanistic and socialistic point of view?
Now what's happening, and I think it's a very important thing, there are many small things going on. There's no real one famous person like Paul Robeson. There are hundreds and thousands of relatively small, unknown people. And I think my most important work was done during the 1950s, where I opened up the college concert field. And I could have died in 1960, and really I believe that my big job was done. A whole lot of young people came along, and they also turned down the chance to work on television or on Broadway or in Hollywood, but simply sang for small groups here and small groups there. Not dozens of them, not hundreds, but now thousands of them there are. They're all over. And there are several books about this phenomena. One was the book written 10 or 20 years ago, Small is Beautiful. Schumacher from England quit a good paying job to come over here, and he made speeches. Small is beautiful. And a great biologist I met, he said, Seeger, take this message around. Think globally, act locally. And I've taken that message all around the country. Also, there was a great anthropologist, Margaret Mead, who said, never doubt that a small group of committed individuals can save the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. So there are now books on this subject. One of the books is Blessed Unrest. A famous dancer said, Martha Graham said to a young dancer, Agnes de Mille, all us artists are filled with a blessed unrest, trying to reach the infinite, and of course never making it, but never giving up trying. And it's all these little things trying. The people with money don't know how to stop us. They could assassinate me, but then there's hundreds more going to take my place.
You're full of hope, but wasn't it a time that you sometimes, or Woody or your friends and comrades, were nearly to resignate in the 50s?
No. Any one of us can be assassinated. And I usually tell people, I think we have a 50-50 chance of there being a human race here in 100 years. Because there could be another insane person like Hitler. There could be insane people that there's a group which keeps track of hate groups. And they say there's over 1,000 little hate groups like the Ku Klux Klan all around America. But they don't know exactly what to do. They can assassinate one person, but that doesn't stop masses of other people. And so I'm more, even, I confess, I've usually said we have a 50-50 chance of there being a human race here, but I confess I say this because I hope I can persuade people to be active. I don't know how to say it. I wish we in this country could learn from Europe to have 2 elections. You vote and then you have a second election. So it's more like what we call proportional representation.
Mm-hmm. When Clinton was first elected president, he appointed a black woman to be in charge of the Civil Rights Commission. But she was attacked very strongly. A black lawyer named Lonnie Guinier. And he withdrew his nomination. She now is at the Harvard Law School. Now, I've never told this story in public, but I think I can tell it now. Last year, Harry Belafonte had his 80th birthday party. And 2 hours later, in comes Bill Clinton. Big smiles, shakes hands everywhere, throws his arm around Harry. He finally got to me. I said, President Clinton, if you had supported Lonnie Guinier, I would have given my life for you. Why didn't you support her? His face just dropped. He said, Pete, I couldn't. Ted Kennedy was against it, and then he saw a camera on him, and he stopped, pushed me aside, put on a big smile, goes shake my hand, big shake. And the camera person was told, it's recording on. Good.
And the camera person was told the next day, destroy that footage. Don't have Seeger asking that question. Don't have Clinton's answer.
It's wonderful. It's a wonderful story. Now it's in public. Pete, what I want, if the curtains of the musical close at the end, I really want to have 2 advices from you. 2 artists towards artists. 2 artists towards artists, which are lefties or humanists or singing the a song in your kind, and to people organized, what are the mistakes the left did, and perhaps you did, and you would advise not to do again?
I've made a lot of mistakes. I did not encourage my wife to be more creative on her own. Instead, she literally sacrificed her own life for me. She kept the house going, she raised the children, and now that she has arthritis, she's in constant pain. It's very difficult for her. And I am having to stay home, and I'm learning to wash the floors and wash the dishes, and I can't answer all the mail. I cannot give interviews to everybody who wants to interview me. You are the exception. No, I've made a lot of mistakes. I think if there is a human race here in 100 years, it may be the worldwide women's movement that may save us. Because women have in their DNA the tradition of nurturing. Men have the tradition of achievement, victory, and power. Actually, if I'd had time to speak today to these campers, this is what I would have said to them. We've got to realize that all our ancestors were good killers if you go back 1,000,000 years.
You before said something about compromise, of the great arts to find good compromises and to divide them from bad compromises, from stinking compromises. What do you think the left in the US did wrong in the last 50 years or 60 years, and what could we learn?
We don't talk with each other as much as we should. I am going to go participate in a strange kind of a demonstration. I've gotten 10 letters saying, please don't participate. It's what they call a virtual rally in November. And it started with a group of Israeli Jews called Arava, A-R-A-V-A, Arava. And on the border of Jordan, Jews and Muslims will start talking. In New York City, at the same time, there'll be 1,000 people, Jews and Arabs, talking. In Los Angeles, California, there'll be 1,000 people talking. And other cities throughout the world, some in Africa, some in Asia.
Left us now?
I've received 10 or more letters saying, please do not have anything to do. They are supported by the government of Israel, and the Palestinians say, please don't even talk to them. But it's almost my religion now. We must talk with people we hate. And I'm going to try and persuade Palestinians to talk. Mandela talked with the whites of South Africa. And Martin Luther King talked with the white people in the South. And it is not going to be easy, because sometimes the same word means different things.
But for the working class, it's hard to talk to capitalists. You couldn't reach them.
Not
That
easy.
closed the way. What to do?
Well, when words fail, try the arts. Pictures, sculpture, music, food. Food is one of the greatest arts. Sports. Mandela brought black and white together with rugby. And look what the Chinese did with ping pong. We have got to find ways to communicate. A friend of mine in Ireland brought the North and South together about 4 or 5 years ago. He said, we're going to have a song fest. And he got some very good singers, and he invited the leaders of the North and the leaders of the South. They've been assassinating each other. And hundreds, thousands of people have been killed. And my friend Tommy Sands remembered that when he was a child, his family's idea of a good time was to buy a barrel of beer and they'd sing all night and they'd invite their neighbors in.
In Ireland.
What?
In Ireland.
Ireland, North Ireland. And it didn't bother them. Their neighbors were Protestant and they were Catholic. They just sing all night. And Tommy says, there's no politics, we're just going to sing. And he had some good singers there. They sang not for 1 hour or 2 hours or 3, more like 4 or 5 hours. And finally they said, well, let's talk. Maybe we can find a way not to kill. They still won't shake hands. That implies they're friendly. No, we're not friends, but we will agree to talk. And so for 4 years, there's been no more assassinations in Ireland. And somehow, we've got to tell the people of the Near East. We don't know how, but we've got to communicate with people we hate. They're killing us. Why shouldn't we kill them? Do what King said. King kept saying over and over again, we will win this bus boycott if we are non-violent. There'd be black doctors and lawyers, and they said, Dr. King, people are getting killed. Maybe accept a compromise. But there were young blacks who said, they bombed us. Why don't we bomb them? Are we scared or something? And King would say, both of you come to the church tonight. He called it a retreat, a religious term. And they would talk. And King would mostly just ask questions. Or that he said, you ask questions and you talk and you ask questions. Maybe 20 minutes later he said, switch. Now you talk and you ask questions. And he wouldn't let any of them get away with saying, I don't care what happens next. He says, we want to win this bus boycott. And finally they said, okay, this is what we will say, this is what we will do, and we'll move forward together.
What can we do to change the politics towards Cuba?
Yeah.
What can we say, how can we encourage Obama to do what he really wants, but he's not able because his spin doctors around were wrong advisors?
I keep telling people what Lincoln said when an abolitionist member of Congress, this abolitionist was named Owen Lovejoy, and his older brother had run an abolitionist newspaper out in Missouri. and the pro-slavery people had burnt his press down. He rebuilt it, and when they said, he said, if you burn my press down, it will be over my dead body. So they shot him, they killed him. But his brother got elected to Congress. He writes, President Lincoln, the Emancipation Proclamation has been on your desk for months. Why have you not signed it? Why haven't you signed it? And Lincoln writes back, he says, I cannot sign it yet. You keep pushing. And I think in a sense that's what Obama is saying to us. I can't do all the things you want me to do. You keep pushing. And we've got to push so that everybody in the country, or at least a majority of the country, will know that we have to get out of Afghanistan. We're not winning there, and nobody's winning. And if we stay there, we're just making things more difficult.
Let me ask you one question very personally, and please excuse me. It's concerning this exceptional love between Toshi and you. Because all the left people, twice married, 3 times married, 4 times married. And you're here in this place together with a woman you know since 60 years. Actually, 60, more than 60 years. Is that concerning your common ideals also? Is love a thing which is not only constructed by personal elements but also by dreams?
Well, I'd say that I have learned from her some of my mistakes. And I didn't learn them early enough. It's been very, very difficult for her. And the telephone rings for me all the time, but not so many people telephone Toshi. But in my book, which you've seen, I've tried to make up, but I can't really. I can't give back Toshi the years that she gave to me when she was young and healthy. She did some extraordinary things. She ran the annual Clearwater Festival. We called it the Revival, the Hudson River Revival. And she, for example, she gave free tickets to people who wanted to be volunteers. They had to work 6 hours, but then they got about 8 hours to see the revival with no money. They didn't have to pay any money. And she made picking up litter, cigarette butts, tin cans, that became the prize volunteer job. People said, I never saw a big festival with 10,000 people and not a single cigarette butt on the ground, not a single can or piece of paper. They were proud that they made history. And Toshi organized the whole thing. She also was able to bring in more African Americans and Latin Americans. And this is what Clearwater has to do now, because they needed to pay for the boat. They, schools in the suburbs could pay money, but the schools in New York City didn't have enough money. Now they are insisting that the boats spend more time near Manhattan, and it take out the black students and the Latino students and Asian students and others from New York. So Clearwater now is a better organization. I'm sure this kind of a problem is coming up through Europe as people go to, Muslims come to Europe. I think we can, Europeans should be able to find ways to reach them. If you really love your sisters and your mothers and your wives, you've got to give them more freedom. It's not going to be easy because the Koran, like the Bible, has only a few places where women lead. But there are places, and I'm sure there must be in the Bible.
There were 25 or 26 parts of the Bible, evangelium, and they only took the Matthäus, Marcus, Johannes, and Lucas. Only the 4, because the others were all destroyed by.
I tell people
because they the role of the women. Yes, and there is a novelle about that. There is a novelle about that.
novel.
A novel about that, about the role of the women in the destroyed parts of the Bible.
Wow. Wow, I'd like to learn.
And it's more, there is more sexuality,
Yeah.
of course, because sexuality is something dark in
Well, I
the
tell
Catholic Church. Yes.
I tell people that Stalin was as much a communist as Constantine was a Christian.
Yes. You know that he turned to Christian in the moment he died. Till then he was no Christian. In the moment he died on the bed, he turned into Christian, Constantine. Pete, if the curtain will fall in the musical, and the musical is concerning the two kinds of trying to make Pete Seeger not to fight against social injustice, no, not to fight. That when the curtain falls, is there any famous last word you want to talk to the public? Do you want to say to the public?
Learn how to talk with people you disagree with. Because scientists keep inventing new ways we can kill each other. And there will be no human race in 100 years. We had a narrow escape with Hitler. Also, we learn not to laugh at people. Down in Nicaragua, I read a short poem called The Young Artist. I translated it into English. I'll just give you my English translation because I've lost the original in Spanish. 3 short verses. Here's the first. The young artist was painting what he was sure would be his masterpiece. Brushstroke after brushstroke, he said, I know it will win a prize in the school competition. Well, it did not win a prize. In fact, it didn't even get honorable mention. He heard through the grapevine that the judges had laughed at it. The young artist gritted his teeth, clenched his fingernails into his palms. He said, someday those people will pay for this. And 30 years later, 6 million died. The story is in Mein Kampf. I think we have to be very careful of laughing at people. And, as I say, find ways we can argue with people we disagree with. So I have 10 letters I have to write serious answers to. Who said, Pete Seeger, please do not participate in this November thing they called a virtual rally with Arava. The Jewish National Program is behind it, and they are killing us. I've gotten letters from Palestine, and from Europe, and from this country, and one of my jobs when you leave here has been to write an answer to these people. No one knows whether there will be a human race here in 100 years. Not only nuclear weapons, but there will be other weapons. Somehow, we must find ways to communicate. And as I say, there are many kinds of arts. When we cannot communicate with talking or writing, we'll communicate with music or pictures or food or sports. Who knows?